on, YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another video. This is actually going to be a sit-down video, as you could probably tell by the title. This is going to be a Q&A. So yes, if you are new here, I am Lexi. Welcome to this channel. I'll put my Instagram below, as always, but thank you for joining me today. So by the title of this video, you guys probably know what it's going to be about. I am titling this video an honest bikini prep Q&A. So all of these questions that I'm going to be answering come from my Instagram. I put up a little question box on my story and asked you guys to just ask me what do you want to know about bikini prep? It can be anything regarding my own bikini preps, anything regarding just bikini prep in general. So when I say bikini prep, for those of you who may be new and have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, I am talking about specifically competing in a bodybuilding competition in the bikini division. So I'll put up a stage picture of me up here so you can kind of see what it looks like. The last time I competed was about 6 months ago, so I am not currently in prep for a show, but I do identify as a bikini competitor. So I'm gonna run through these questions that you guys asked. Because I am old school, I wrote them all down and just thought that would be easiest than dealing with a device and looking at them off of that. So let's get right to it. So the first question, I like this. We're starting very blunt right off the bat. Do you need PEDs to go pro? So do you need PEDs, which are performance enhancing drugs, to turn pro as a bikini competitor? Some may argue differently, but I 100% say no, you do not, because here's why. I know so many competitors who have turned pro without taking PEDs. I know it's possible, and some may argue that only the best of the best genetics wise can turn pro without PEDs, but I think that it's absolutely doable to turn pro as a bikini competitor without PEDs. The amount of muscle you need as a bikini competitor, I mean, yes, you need to have muscle, but it's doable, natural, in my opinion. Some may argue with that, but that's my personal opinion, and this is my Q&A. So that's what I have for that question, but I like that question. And there's actually another PED related question that I will get into at the end. Next question, so this one comes from one of my clients. So she hasn't competed yet, but she's getting ready to, and she said, what really goes on backstage? So actually I got a lot of questions about this, and I hate to break it to you, but the backstage is actually pretty boring, in the sense of there's nothing crazy that goes on backstage besides it's a lot of sitting, a lot of waiting. It's honestly, that's why I say bring a blanket, bring a yoga mat, bring a towel, bring stuff you can just camp out and lay around on backstage, because it is a lot of sitting. It is a lot of waiting. Especially as a bikini competitor, you're always gonna go on last. So if you're at a show and there are, there's wellness, there's figure, there's the men, they all go before you, and you are the very last division to go on stage. So it's a lot of sitting around. It really is. There's nothing too exciting that goes on backstage. I mean, you'll see some girls practicing their posing. You'll see people slamming rice cakes or whatever they're supposed to eat before they, get on stage. But it's a lot of sitting around, honestly. But it's a really good opportunity to make new friends, too. That's what I like it for. So that answers that question. Next question, this was also from another one of my clients. When did you know you wanted to compete? So I like this question, and I actually did a whole video, I think it was a couple months ago. I talked about how I got into competing. And so how did I know I wanted to compete? So to make a long story short, you can go back and watch that video for more of the full story. But I got into weightlifting my senior year of high school. And then I moved to Florida for school. And, for those of you who don't know, the bodybuilding world is pretty big here in Florida, or specifically where I live in Florida, and it wasn't big where I was from originally, which was the Midwest. So I moved down here and I started going to the gym around here, and I was meeting different competitors, and I was actually getting asked do you compete? And I got asked that so much that I was like, you know what, I'm intrigued, I want to try it out, I want to look into this. So that's how I decided I wanted to compete. It was another challenge for me, because I knew I had the discipline, and I was a gymnast growing up, and I wanted just another challenge, in a way kind of gymnastics meets were always the challenge. So I wanted another challenge. So that's how I decided to compete. Next question. So advice for somebody doing their first show. I like this question. So I would say, oh my God, I could literally make a whole video on this topic. Advice for somebody doing their first show, advice for a first-time competitor. Go on my Instagram and go under my IGTV videos, because I did make a video specifically on this. But in a nutshell, my biggest piece of advice for somebody doing their first show: A, if you are a first-time competitor, do not try and prep yourself. You are already learning enough as is, just being a first-time competitor. It is very hard to prep yourself for a show, let alone your first show. So get a good quality coach. A little shameless plug, I do coach competitors. So if you're interested in inquiring with me, I always have my inquiry link below, but get a coach. Second off, go to a show. Do not let the first show you compete in be like the first show you've ever been to. Go to a show, experience what a show is like as a spectator, just watch. And then, another thing for somebody doing their first show that I would recommend is, there's that old saying, like, too many cooks in the kitchen can be a bad thing. And what I mean by that is, if you're doing your first show, be very selective with who you listen to. Listen to your coach, listen to, your coach. And honestly, maybe if you have an opposing coach, I don't know, but you're going to find that a lot of people have a lot of differing opinions. When you're prepping, they're going to tell you to do one thing or tell you to do another thing. So just hire a good coach. Listen to your coach, shut off what everybody else is saying, and also do not compare your journey to other competitors' journeys, because sometimes you may look at a competitor on like Instagram or whatever and think, oh my God, I have no way of placing next to her, but you never know what somebody's gonna look like on stage. So in a nutshell, hopefully that answers that question. Like I said, I could go off on a huge tangent on that, but those are my main pieces of advice for somebody doing their first show. So good question. Somebody asked, this is a really simple question: what is first call outs? So when you're at a show, a bodybuilding show, and this is going to be the same answer for regardless, like if you're a bikini competitor, a figure competitor, a wellness competitor, what is first call outs? Essentially, first call outs is a good thing. Let's say in your specific height class, there are 10 girls, right? Well, they're gonna call out probably 5 girls in the first call out, and that's essentially the top 5. So the first call out is always going to be like the top of that class, if that makes sense. Okay, next question. What was your scariest moment? So, oh my gosh, this is like making me think. So I'm assuming my scariest moment in all of my bikini preps, and I have gone through a total of, I've competed 5 times, a total of 2 separate preps. So I would say my scariest moment, oh gosh, this is hard. Like, the one that comes to mind first is when I went to my first show, which was when I was a freshman in college. I competed at the Orlando Europa, and I was a freshman and I did not have my car here in Florida, so I carpooled to that show with my teammate. And it was the first time I had ever booked a hotel on my own and done all that little adulting stuff on my own, right? Because I guess I was what, 18? Yeah, 18. And 18, 19. And I remember getting to the venue, and the hotel that I had booked at was not like the hotel I thought I had booked at. It was the same chain hotel, but a different location. And I was already so nervous as is going into that competition. It was my first competition ever. So that was a really awful way to start off the show weekend. And to top it all off, I forgot my ID. So when I was checking into my hotel, they wouldn't let me check in because I didn't have my ID. So I had to call my college roommate and get her to find my ID in my dorm room and send a picture. And that way they would let me in my hotel room. But that was probably the scariest moment. Even though that doesn't really have anything to do with actual prep. That was at my first show, and I remember just being like, oh my gosh, what did I do? So that's kind of a funny, scary moment. Okay, do you lessen your sodium in prep? No, I do not change my sodium in prep. The only time sodium may change a little bit in prep is in peak week, and I don't cut sodium in peak week. In fact, the only time sodium has the ability to change is the day or two before my show. Sometimes we will actually increase sodium. So no, my sodium is not cut during prep, and it does not lessen. I just make sure I keep it consistent, because that's the thing with sodium. You just have to keep it consistent, and make sure you're getting enough sodium too. You don't want to cut out sodium. That's not a good thing. Sodium isn't a bad thing. So no, I do not lessen my sodium in prep. Okay, I like this question, kind of another juicy one. So do you think competitors should be more open about enhancements? Yes. I do, and some may argue with that, but let me explain why I think that people should be more open about using PEDs. You know, I'm all for, like, I'm first off gonna say I am a natural athlete. I have never taken any performance enhancing drugs, nor do I plan on it. And I know specifically if I ever did do something like that and chose to take that route, I would be very open with you guys and telling you that I made that decision. And you know, to each their own. I respect anybody who decides to go that route. That's their decision. But the reason I feel like some bikini competitors, like, I wish they were more open about it is I am a coach to a lot of first-time competitors, and I find that as a first-time competitor, what happens is you look at these like pros, or you look at these like really, really amazing bikini competitors, and you're like, I want to look like them. Why can't I look like them? You know, I'm working just as hard. But then, you know, as a coach, I always have to put into perspective, well, so-and-so, you have to remember, they may be on performance-enhancing drugs. So yeah, you may be working as hard as them, but they're on performance enhancing drugs, right? So I think sometimes it can be very discouraging to like newbies or first time competitors or people that are just kind of like getting into the sport. It can be kind of discouraging to see like other competitors and be like, why can't I look like them when I'm working just as hard? But it's like, well, those girls may or may not be on PEDs, right? That's like why I wish people were a little bit more open about it. Again, I think everybody deserves privacy, right? But that's just my personal opinion. So that's a good question though. And like I said, if I ever chose to go that route, which I don't plan on it, I would always be pretty open with you guys and letting you know I made that decision. Okay, next question. How do you address binge episodes to help you or your clients get back on track post-show? Okay, so this is a good question. I have actually never really experienced like binging episodes right after my shows. And I honestly credit this to just having like quote unquote healthier preps, in the sense of I have never been with a coach who put me on a very strict meal plan. I have never had to go like sub 1,000 calories on prep. Like I have never had to take those crazy extremities, whereas I find that a lot of times girls who take those extreme measures, like by their show day afterwards, they just want to go crazy and eat everything in sight. And I have honestly, you know, I've struggled with binging in the past, like when I was in high school, but I have never actually struggled with it post-show. And like I said, I think it's because I've just really had like good preps where I follow macros. You know, I'm not on a meal plan, and I don't have to go like 800 calories or below, you know? And that's absolutely doable for most people. You know, sometimes I won't go into that tangent, but like if that's the route your coach is putting you on for a prep, I just encourage you to maybe reach out and seek other options. So anyways, I would say if I had a client though who was experiencing binging after a show, first off, you know, you have to identify like, do they need further help? Sometimes it is worth seeking out like a therapist who's actually licensed in that specific field, because as a coach, I'm not, you know, an eating disorder specialist. So sometimes I do have to refer people to talk to somebody who is, you know, within that scope. But I would say oftentimes you have to get to the root of why somebody is binging, right? And that's why I think it is so important when you compete to have a post-show plan. Do not just compete and then like have no plan after your show, because post-show is a very hard time, and I think it helps, you know, to lessen the chances of a binging episode if you have a post-show plan. If you know exactly like what you're gonna do after your show, whether that be do another show or do a reverse diet, like have that plan in place beforehand. And typically that's what I do with all my clients, and it does help to lessen the chances of somebody competing and just being like, oh, well, now I don't have any plans or goals, so I'm just gonna eat whatever, right? Somebody I do want to shout out too is Celeste Rains Turk. I'll put her Instagram below. She's one of my good friends. She also has a really good podcast, but she does a lot on the side of the mental health, the psychological side of competing. And she talks a lot about like bikini competitors and their relationship with food post-show, so check her out. Again, I'll put her Instagram below. She's awesome, and she has a lot of valuable resources on that topic if you are somebody who struggles with binging, specifically post-show, because like I think it's a very common thing. It is. Okay, a couple more questions, so hopefully you guys are enjoying this so far. I know I am. Okay, so what is the difference between your clients who are lifestyle client plans and competition prep client plans? So honestly, at the end of the day, there isn't a huge difference in the actual plan in place that, you know, between a lifestyle client and a competition prep client as far as like training and me giving them macros. However, a competition prep client plan is going to probably be a lot more specific in the sense of, as a coach, I expect a lot more detail in your check-ins. We monitor a lot, a lot of different variables, a lot more than we may monitor if, compared to if you were just a lifestyle client. So that's like, I would say, the biggest difference, but also I would say I'm a little bit softer with my lifestyle clients, if they need it, rather than my competition prep clients. Like, I know, I'm not going to reward you if you're if you're on competition prep and, you hit your macros 7 days a week. I'm not going to reward you, because like, that's what you should be doing, right? Whereas if you're a lifestyle client, who just struggles with consistency, and you go 7 days, out of the week of hitting your macros, I'm going to be like, yes, that's awesome. Good job. And I would say the other biggest difference between a lifestyle client plan and a competition prep client plan is lifestyle clients, I do tend to throw more things such as like, untracked meals or intuitive days in there when it comes to their food intake. Whereas on a competition prep client plan, I can't give you, I'm not going to be giving you full on intuitive eating days or a bunch of untracked meals all the time, right? It's a little just bit more stricter in that way. Okay, next question. What does it mean to get your pro card? So, good question. I could see why, probably a lot of first-time competitors, a lot of people who are newer to this industry, you hear this term pro card being thrown around a lot, right? And essentially, I think that's most people's goal when they get into this sport and they compete as a bikini competitor. Everybody wants to get their pro card, right? So essentially, that means that you first off have to qualify for a national show. So you have to compete at a regional show. You have to qualify at that regional show to compete at a national show. And then at a national show, you have to either get you have to get first place in your height class. Some national shows actually require that like you win the overall, or it's like the top 2 in the overall. Every national show is a little different, but essentially you have to nationally qualify at a regional show. Then you have to go compete at a national show, and national shows are huge. You're going against a lot more girls at national shows than regional shows, and then you have to be the best of the best at a national show to get your pro card. So that's essentially how you get your pro card and what it means to be a bikini pro. Like, essentially you're like the best of the best once you get your pro card. So that is that answer in a nutshell. Okay, next question. A lot of people mention getting judges' feedback. How do you get that? So great question. I strongly recommend, if you are competing, you should always get the judges' feedback after a show. So how do you get the judges' feedback? So that's a great question. Typically when you compete at a show, some shows, I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys hear that in the background. There's like a really noisy crowd outside in the hallway. I think they're quiet now. Anyways, if you compete at a show, my biggest piece of advice, get your judges' feedback. Now, very rarely are you gonna find that like you can actually stay after the shows and talk to the judges. Sometimes you can. I have done that before. If you ever compete at a show with Sandy Williamson as like the head judge, she is notorious for staying after and physically, like in person, giving you your feedback as an athlete. Now, like another case scenario is you go to a show and let's say it ends at like 11 p.m. and you can't stay after to get the judges' feedback. Do not stress. What you would need to do is you would need to just, after the show, wait for your stage shots to be released, and then figure out who the head judges were of that show, and then find their emails. Typically they're listed like on the show website. Find their emails and email your stage shots to those head judges and ask them for your feedback. So that's how you go about getting the judges' feedback. Okay, next question. Do you pick a specific show date, or would you recommend letting your body decide when it's ready to compete? So that is a great question. So essentially this person is asking, do you, like when you start a bikini prep, do you actually pick like, I want to do this show, this is the show I'm doing, or do you just start prep and kind of pick your show later on depending on how your body is responding? I think it could go either way. Oftentimes I do really love starting a competition prep, and with my clients, we'll pick out like 1 or 2 potential shows, right? But we never sign up for them right off the bat. What I like to do is maybe have a few shows in mind and then just start prep, and depending on how the body is responding, pick your show from there, if that makes sense. But I've definitely known people who just start prep and they're like, I don't know what show I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna start prep, and then once I start leaning out and getting close to being stage lean, I'll pick my show around that time. And that's not a bad idea. I really don't think it is. I think sometimes people pick shows and then it stresses them out, like having a show picked. And then when their stress is high, their body doesn't respond how they want it to. So sometimes that can almost be more stressful for somebody. But I would say my biggest piece of advice would be maybe have a couple show dates in mind and be flexible, be open to being flexible with changing your show date if your body isn't responding accordingly. Okay, we have made it down to the last couple of questions because I don't want to make this like too long. But anyways, how strict / precisely was I with tracking during prep when it came to seasonings and spray oils? So at the end of the day, you know, like I say, everything in moderation. Seasonings and spray oils, essentially most of them have 0 calories, right? Now that is assuming that you're just using them very sparingly in moderation. So for me, I personally did not track things like that. I know that there are some people out there that are like, you know, you have to track spray oil because it really does have calories. But at the end of the day, if you're using it in moderation and you're using it sparingly, I wouldn't say you have to track it. Now, here is my philosophy though. When I was in prep and I was using those things in moderation, I was progressing week by week and I wasn't tracking those things, right? Because essentially they have 0 calories. Now, if it came down to I was not progressing for some reason and I was using all that stuff and not tracking it, that's when I would look at maybe starting to track that stuff, right? But because I was progressing, I was like, okay, well, there's really no need to stress yourself out about doing something when you're progressing, right? So that's my take on that. And you know, like essentially most seasonings, most spray oils, like they're all gonna be 0 calories if you're using them sparingly, right? That's the key word. If you're dumping the whole thing of seasoning on your food, or like you're going through a whole little like can of mustard, like in one day, like yes, you're probably gonna wanna try to track that somehow. Like that's going to be calories, right? But if you're using things sparingly, I wouldn't say you need to track them unless, you know, if you are using a lot of seasonings and you're not tracking them and like you're not progressing, maybe look into tracking that stuff. But I personally did not track seasonings or spray oils. But I honestly didn't use a lot of spray oil either. Seasonings though, I love my seasonings. Okay. Last question. I like ending on this one. So what is my biggest goal when it comes to competing in bikini competitions? So great question. So I would say at the end of the day, my goal is to get my pro card. I would love to be a bikini pro. Like that's my goal. You know, I would love to eventually compete in Olympia one day, but I think I want to start like with the goal of I want to win my pro card. Now before that, I would love to win an overall at a regional show. Like that's my next goal. And then after that, if I achieve that, I'm gonna say when I achieve that, I'm gonna like speak it into reality. When I eventually win an overall at a regional show, I want to go to a national level show and get my pro card. So that's my goal. And then also like I just, you know, through competing, I really just like to inspire and motivate and like educate you guys as much as I can and share my journey, because I know a lot of like first-time competitors and just competitors in general are watching this video and watching my channel right now, and I want to give back to you guys in a sense of being somebody that is just real in the industry. So that's, you know, that's like my main goals. So anyways, if you guys made it to the end of this video, thank you, because it was a little longer, but I had some fun answering these questions. And again, if I'm looking down, it's because I have the list right like in front of me. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love doing Q&As and I'll definitely plan on doing some more in the future. But if you could do me a favor and like this video, if you made it to the end and you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Tag me if you're watching this video and doing your cardio, because I know how it can be in prep. You know, you got a lot of cardio when you throw on the YouTube to get through. Subscribe to my channel, give me a follow on Instagram, and as always, comment below if there's anything in the future that you want to see in my future videos. But wherever you guys are at in the world, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you have a great rest of your day.